Hey everybody, I wanted to do a brief video just touching on the details of installing our new S1000RR window link for the 2020 BMW S1000RR. If you want to sort of take a look here, we have a fully adjustable link. It comes complete with needle bearings, and there's little dust seals in there, so you don't have to worry about using your stock ones. The only thing we are going to use from the stock link are the internal bearing spacers. Now, these links, we have two different configurations, and the reason I showed you these is basically we have configuration 1 with the jam nuts on the inside. Now, if you want to raise the bike, these will allow you to lower and raise the bike. You can raise the bike as much as 2 inches. All you need to do is look inside. This is our window for this particular link. Look inside here and measure to make sure you have a 10 millimeters or about 1/4 inch of thread showing. That way you know you have plenty of engagement there. You don't have to worry about it pulling apart. Now, opposite of most motorcycles, which I'm finding there's a lot of on this particular bike, usually the longer the link, the lower the bike. On this bike, it's different. The shorter the length, the lower the bike. So what you can do, you can actually unscrew this, flip these around and put the nuts on the other end, and then you can see we can get a very, very small center to center dimension here. With this, you can, with that configuration, you can raise the bike 2 inches. You can lower the bike 1 inch until you get into some clearance problems that we'll get into in a little bit more detail here. And then if you want to go even further than that, you have to move the voltage regulator and modify this battery tray, which gets really, really detailed. And I can tell you this, unless you are a highly experienced wrench, you're going to want the BMW service manual for this bike. It happens to come in a DVD. We're planning on offering it because I can tell you what, you don't have to tear the bike down this much to replace what they call the link strut with our adjustable window link. But I have accessed that manual many, many times because there are just some idiosyncrasies to this bike that BMW does a much, much better job explaining than we could go through, even with our very lengthy instructions with plenty of images that will be made available to you also. So what I want to do right now is just sort of address the things that you're really going to want to pay attention to before you start the disassembly process. Now, one of the things that we're going to have to do in order to get this link out, we're going to have to drop the shock. And you can see this wire back here. It's very hard to see. But basically, if you just pull that wire out of its holder and get it some slack so that you can drop the shock, that wire controls the rebound and compression dampening in the shock. So if you break it, you've broken your shock, and that's a bad thing. The other thing, this has dynamic dampening control, which basically means they measure the ride height of the bike. And one of the things that you're going to want to do, most guys are going to lower the rear and then they'll lower the front to match so the bike is level. By the time we get this thing slammed into dirt, this adjustment could come into play. So basically, before you take anything apart, it's very simple. I just took a straight edge, laid it up against this, and then made a mark here. So regardless of where we end up, let me go ahead and pull this off here real quick. I've just got it hanging there by a couple threads for a demonstration. So when we get the bike fully lowered, this angle is going to change, possibly considerably. See what I mean here? So it's going to come way back like this as the swing arm moves forward, and we may have to address recalibration here. Since I already pulled that off, we'll just go ahead and tie it up and out of the way because we're not going to really be messing with it right now. All right, so the quickest way I have found to get to this without having to when you look in the manual, you've got to remove these bolts, remove all the panels, remove the gas tank, flip this all up, which you'll have to do if you're going to do the modification. But if you're not going to do all those mods, who wants to go through all that work if you can actually get to this thing? So what I've done here, I've got my slot in my cable. I got this tied up out of the way. All I have to do, and I'll show you this. So right now we have tension on the spring. You'll notice I have the bike very securely fastened up in the front, also on the rear stand. So when you do go back and redo your calibration, you want to duplicate this as much as possible. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a little bit of the pressure off of this so that my bolt comes out fairly easily. Come on, there we go. All right, now, once you do that, you can just sort of rotate the shock forward, and then you can lower the bike to get to this bolt if you're going to change the shock. But what we want to do is we're actually going to raise the bike, and watch what happens here. This bolt that is very, very difficult to reach just keeps coming back closer to us. So that way we can get it's a T, what is this? Get my glasses on here. A T50 Torx. And that way we can come back in here, get that bolt loosened up, and then makes it a little easier here. All right, now when you go to remove this bolt fully, and I'm taking the weight off the shock right now, so that helps it unscrew. Remember, you have metal shims in here, bushings, and you don't want to lose those. Make sure those are in place. All right, so get that bolt out of the way. We'll get that later. Now we just let the shock come down a little bit. Remove this. Boink. And there is your OEM link. So we will be reusing these bushings in our link, and we're gonna put a little bearing grease on them so that they work smoothly. Go ahead and find that bolt before I forget. I really have no idea where that went. That's a big old bolt to be lost. Who has time for such crap? All right. Okay, we pulled the spacers out of the OEM link. We won't be needing that any longer. What we're going to do is put a little wheel bearing grease inside these rollers. All right. And then put a little bit here. No such thing as using too much lube. All right, we'll just wipe off the excess here. And for this demonstration, we are using configuration number 1. The links will be oriented this way with the Brock's facing out, with the nuts on the inside there, and then you can see how easy it is to adjust. Out of the box, it's close to stock length. So I'm just going to go ahead and try to put this in here. Just do this the opposite of how we, oops. You may want to have a helper hold your shock for you there. We'll try to do this. Try real hard not to drop our hardware. It's really tight in here, guys, as you can tell. This is not your typical easy install. Basically, just hold that, and then put my glasses on, put my tongue in the right location, and try to get this bolt in here, which, like I said, is a real pain in the rear. I'm trying to get that thing to stop. I'm going to borrow my cameraman here for a second. Can I get you to hold up on this shock, Corey? Just hold it straight up. That'll give me the room I need to get in here and install this. Okay. Go ahead and let that shock drop just a little more. Oh, nope, come back up. Okay, let's see what's going on here. I'm just going to raise the link up a little bit so we didn't have it adjusted correctly. Counterclockwise, raise the link. There we go. Now we've got it where we need it. All right. Now I'm just going to come in here real quick. And we'll have the torque specs for you in our instructions or in the manual. For now, I'm just going to set it, oops, a little rowdy. Do the same thing up in here. All right. So now we have our link installed, but what we're going to have to do is keep lowering the bike so you can see this really clearly now. For this particular, if you want to come over here, basically what we can do is we've got to lower the bike to where these connectors almost rest on the top of this shock reservoir. And one of the things when you look at the geometry on this bike, it's a little bit strange. Under compression, the shock actually moves away from the bottom of the battery tray or inner fender, whatever you want to call this. So by even if we only have a millimeter's clearance, so long as we push up on it to make sure that under, if you go over a dip in the road and it instead of compressing, it releases your suspension, that you have plenty of travel here. But I'll show you what I mean. I don't have the shock connected yet. Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to simulate this going, or to move this up, and it makes it real easy. We can go ahead and adjust it up, and what you can see is we're fairly close there. I don't know if you can see, basically the stud is almost at the end here. So now we have to lower the bike so that we can get the shock bolt back in, and then we'll finish our adjustment. All right. And we will go back in and retorque all of those. But for now, what we're trying to do here, and what I'm doing, basically what I'm doing is just gently lowering the jack while I'm twisting the adjustment rod. And you can see, if you watch our clearance here, you can see how far we can go. Oops, got ahead of myself. Now what I ran into there, I ran out of adjustment because I didn't have these nuts properly moved towards the center to allow me to continue on. Getting pretty close, and I know this because we're going to have approximately 4 threads showing once we've got it adjusted up in the right spot. All right, can you see that? We've probably got another 40 thousandths or millimeter or more to go. I'm just going to keep going a little bit more. All right, currently we are actually resting on the connector. So what I want to show is to simulate rebound. I'm going to have to lower the bike here. I want you to watch up in there. I'm just going to come and lift up on the bike. Looks like we've got just enough clearance. And then when I press down on the bike, actually pull it off the rear stand for this. Hold on a second. Very difficult to compress the suspension for this demonstration with jack underneath the bike. All right. Okay, I want you to look at the clearance there. Now I'm raising up on the bike. We're not coming in contact with the connector. And if I simulate going over a bump, you can see how it moves away from the connector. So that's about as low as you can get this bike without the next mods we're going to show you. Okay, that's as easy as this install gets. We explained how you could raise the bike if you need to. You're going to want a fully adjustable kickstand, and our road stand allows you to go longer. And then we shortened the bike. We lowered the chassis by about 1 inch. You could still get away with the road stand. I think most people who lower their bikes are going to go from maximum low, if that's how you explain it. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to go ahead and move into the next step. Obviously, we have serious clearance issues between the shock and the voltage regulator and the bottom of the tray here. Our friends in Germany make a hell of a product, but they had in no way, shape, or form figured that anybody was going to lower this bike. I can tell you that. They made it really tough. So we're gonna go ahead and switch over to link configuration number 2 for steps C and D, which is to shorten up these eyelets so that we can get the bike absolutely as low as possible with the stock shock. And then we'll show you how to get it even lower if you want to use this configuration with a shortened aftermarket shock. So we'll be right back. Okay, for steps C and D to lower the bike even lower, we have to switch from configuration 1 to configuration 2. Now I just went ahead and pulled configuration 1 out of the bike. I'll show you what we're going to do here. Let's pull those spacers out. Now it's very simple. We're just going to unscrew the rod, and I want you to notice something here. I'll wait till I get it all the way apart. Got some killer adjustability in this thing. Too bad more people don't raise their bikes. All right, So now, okay, now the jam nuts, see this face, how it's nice and flat? You have to, that's to give the jam nut a flat surface to sit on here. Because if we try to put it here, it can't tighten. So basically what that means is, and this is also a left-hand thread, which means you have to tighten it to loosen it. If you're not familiar with left-hand threads, righty-tighty is actually lefty-loosey on left-hand threads. So now we'll just take this configuration, put these here. This gets flipped. This gets flipped. We'll go ahead and start it righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. And now we'll put it back together. And you can see now with this particular configuration, we can go super short on the link. It will actually, it'll almost touch in here. And then we'll put the jam nuts that lock the link in place after it's adjusted on the outside. All right, now I know about where we need to be for this one. So I'm gonna come back right around here, and then we've still got plenty of lube on there from the last time. We'll just set this here for now. Now I want to point out some of the areas of concern because you can see it pretty well here now that we've got the shock out of the way. Basically what happens is you have a couple problems. You've got the voltage regulator here. These are the connectors we were running into. We're just going to basically move that out of the way. And then you have, once that's moved out of the way, you have another problem. And I can't really put this back for you, but you can see where BMW had a little cutout here because this piece used to live right there. Well, this cutout limited how far the shock reservoir could go up. So what I had to do was cut a slot in here, and we'll show you how you get to that here in a minute, because you can try to get to it from here, which I guess you really could. We ended up going the hard route. Of course, we already have everything pulled off this bike. It's getting a pipe, it's getting a sprint filter, it's getting all the other stuff. So I'll show you how we did it. If you wanted to move the voltage regulator and just come in here and cut your slot, I think you might be able to do that. Big question would be, can you get the Dremel tool in there or whatever you're going to use to cut it out? But we'll go ahead and do it show you the long way. Made it pretty simple, so we'll get to that here in just a minute. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is just go ahead and pull this voltage regulator out of the way. It's going to be relocated. Now, I have already removed the battery because we were working on the bike. So pulling this off. Oops. Great. Keep dropping stuff. Now you can see the voltage regulator is ready to come out. Just press the pins on the back side and pull the wires. Of course, I've got bearing grease all over my gloves. So this thickness, we can now lower the bike at least that much once we move this. So there's some little studs here that get in the way. With the battery out of the battery box, you just press that little plate and we won't be using that any longer, so we're going to go ahead and set it aside. Like I said, you may want to go ahead and cut your slot now if you can get in there. You can see there's some wires here that you definitely want to get out of the way before you do any cutting. I'll show you that here in a moment also. And then we're also going to reroute these connectors to match where we're going to move the voltage regulator to. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to loosen the tail section top bolt, and we're going to completely remove the lower bolt. We're going to do that on both sides. All right, now this is important. What we're going to be doing is rotating this up to give us clearance. We had to pull the brake reservoir off. You need to make sure these hoses, brake lines and other lines. Got our shock line here. Now that's one thing. We've got shock way down in there. The connector for the shock is right here. So because we already have the tank off, it's easy just to disconnect that and get it out of the way. We'll just let that sit there for now. It'll be fine. And then we are going to take our trusty tie strap. Actually, you know what? I had a little setup here that we moved, and let's go ahead and put that back on. That way I know it's going to work like I want it to. And then we will connect this up, and we'll just go flip it up here. Now you're gonna want to watch over here. Now this just shows you how much more room we had to cut this piece out. And basically it sat in right like this, and all I really did was draw a line straight up to the bottom of the battery box and just chopped it. This is plenty of clearance. I actually had to go a little wide in here because the Dremel, let me get the tools. I'll show you the tools I use for this. I use a little abrasive cutoff wheel. I made my marks, used a cutoff wheel to cut around in here, and then I just used cartridge roll, little sand roll to come in here and smooth everything up, get rid of any sharp edges. It really wasn't. It's not that big a job. It's not that challenging. Getting all the body work and everything off, that's a different story. So anyway, what we'll do now, I'll show you while we're talking about it. There's when this lever rotates up, it has a tendency to want to get into these wires, and you can see it pretty easily here. But that is really it. This part runs into the bottom. This part runs into the bottom. So that's really where you're going to have to limit the amount of lowering that you can do because of these bike constraints. Now, if you want to remove your ABS unit and chop a big hole and all that stuff, go for it. Our link will allow you to keep going lower. What we've opted to do is just go with a drag shock that's about 2 inches shorter, and that'll allow us, we're going to set this bike up for the super stock drag racing class, and so that means the lowest part of the bike can be at 2-inch ground clearance, and that's what we want. It's really critical that we get the bike as low as possible. So anyway, let's keep on going here. This is what most of your street guys are going to do. Like I said, you can lower the seat about 2.85 inches, not quite 3. So works out really nice. And if you go with a step seat, you can you really lowers things down for you. So I'm going to lower the bike and show you what we're going to do with this relocating stuff. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. So I just chopped this out. I vacuumed up all my mess. I had my safety glasses on, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and lower this back down so I can sort of show you what we're doing. That there for now. Now, the voltage regulator is going to be relocated over here. The problem that we ran into, though, you've got a little fuse box here. I know that's straight crazy, right? Or maybe those are just spares. Why have wires with them? I don't know. Little fuse box. So that was mounted here. There's a little tab that you can just bend out of the way that unlocks it, so you can pull that up. Same thing with the big main fuse here. it was down, and they conveniently, well, this tab you just move it backwards. So this is the one where it was sort of difficult to get to the tab. I ended up just sort of yanking it off there. Everything was fine. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up relocating this fuse, and this fuse box just will go right there. So in order to do this, we're going to take the original wires. Here's the gray connector, and there is barely enough room to do this. So what I ended up having to do was break some of the wire ties loose to get a little bit of extra in this harness so that it would fit. So basically what we're gonna do, let's get that, put this connector on. Make sure you hear it click. Then we're going to get the gray connector on. Yet again, make sure you hear it click. So now all we're going to do is just sort of push that down into there. The battery cable will go back on. You can still use the stock battery. You do not need to go to a smaller battery with this particular arrangement. And the only thing that you're going to lose, there's a cheesy little bracket that usually goes here to hold your battery back off of the ABS unit. Well, now these parts are going to do exactly the same thing, and you don't have to worry about your battery moving around, because your seat, when you mount your seat, it comes down and presses on the battery. So this setup here, not only is it about all we have right now, because we don't have a relocation harness just yet. But that'll work out just fine. Now we will go ahead and put our link on and get it adjusted up as low as we can get it with the stock shock. All right, so now you can see this is the orientation of the links. In order to go shorter, which is going to lower the bike, this will get turned in this direction, actually in clockwise direction. So go ahead and slip this up in there, and we'll see what we got. All right, a couple turns on that. And now, because we have the gas tank off, makes it a little bit easier to put this on. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to lower the bike to give me a little bit more room, or actually, sorry, raise the bike to give me a little more room. Can I get you to hold the shock up for me? Can you do it from that side? That'd be great. That'd be better. We need 3 or 4 hands to do this job. All right, we're close. Yeah. If this is your final assembly, you're going to want to put some Loctite glue on the threads of these, and torque them down to 65 foot-pounds. We're not finished yet. We still have more work to do. We have another shot coming, so we're not going to mess with that right now. But I am going to go ahead and just sort of tighten it up so that we can do our final adjustment for step C. So one of the things that can happen to you here, I'm going to go ahead and pull this out so you can see it. I can't get enough thread engagement because the bushing that protects the aluminum on the swing arm is not situated correctly. So get this out. All right. You've got to make sure that these little bushings are situated inside the pocket here, because they're actually what they move in there, and that's what clamps everything together. That's what actually clamps the link. What we'll do, move this back up to where we need to be. Yeah, just hold that real quick. You just pull in. All right, remember, we're trained professionals. When the shock fell, the link, I didn't have the jam nuts very tight. The link went and it twisted. So if you remember, the Brock should be facing on the outside. This is definitely not how we want this link to be oriented. So I'm gonna go ahead, pull the bolt out, and flip it. That is the correct way. Can you lift that up any more for me? There you go, a little more. All right, so the Brock's is facing out on the lower end and on the upper block. You can see it there, so go ahead and tighten this up a little bit. How handy is that? All right. Now, we will just go on the bike, get that hole lined up. All right. That's good enough for what we're doing. Now, so where are we? If you look, we still have quite a bit we can go down. And one of the things that's nice about the hole we have up here now is that's going to help us determine how far we can go. All right, now that we have the link installed, we're going to go ahead, in order to adjust it, we're going to come back over. Yet again, if this is your final assembly, put some blue Loctite on these and torque them down to the spec in the book, which I don't have right now, but we will have in our instructions. All right. So now we've got this where it needs to be. All right, I can still feel. Using the same little trick. And basically, I'm just going to keep lowering that jack until I don't think it can go anymore. And one thing that does help, come over here. All right, so if you look here, you can see the top of the shock. I still have a little bit more room I can go, so I'm going to do that. Are we touching yet? Well, let me show you another area of concern. All right, so it's really tough to see up in here to see how just exactly how low you can go, but I do want you to see. Now it looks like we're pretty close to topped out here, but See this piece of plastic? The top of the shock, if you can see that, the top of the shock really sort of bottoms out on that. So, and this is sort of a great example. See the wire here? This wire? If this wire was shoved up in here, it could definitely get pinched and cause you all kinds of electrical problems. So we'll be pulling this back and out of the way before we operate the bike. But this is about as low as we can go. And I mean, you can see it's, it's low. Here. Take that off. This is my seat height simulation. So yeah, we've got this bike currently lowered a little over 3 inches. You can see it is definitely getting tight in here. If you run over a bump, especially if you got 2 passengers, you know, you could get into trouble. But that's pretty slammed, and we haven't even adjusted the front yet. So this particular setup is going to work out well for most people. This is where we would go in now, and we would tighten these jam nuts to lock the link into place. You can just sort of see here. You might be able to get a torque wrench on that if you really try, but basically this works out real nice. 3/4 inch. You can actually get to this. All right. All right. So then assembly is in reverse of disassembly. Unless you are going to go with a shorter shock. And that is step D, is going to a shock that's shorter. If your shock is short enough, you may not have to, and especially, so we're going to put a remote reservoir shock into this, so we won't have to worry about this top reservoir causing us problems anymore. So if you go with the shorter shock, which of course is quite a bit more expensive than just purchasing a link, but if you do go with an aftermarket shorter shock, you may not have to move the voltage regulator or cut a hole in the bottom of the pan. You should have enough clearance there. So we don't know. Our shock still isn't here. It's supposed to be here this week, and we will continue on once we get that and show you exactly what we've got. Until then, man, I wish we could go through everything, but it would be a 2-hour video. That's why we tried to sort of just make this a bridge so that you know the things that are important when you go to install your new Brock's Performance fully adjustable window link. So until next time, I'm Brock from Brock's Performance. I'll see you then.